Welcome back to the Kingfisher Podcast with Eric and Bron Whitley. We're so glad that you're joining us once again today as we talk about topics like family and life and ministry.
Yeah, welcome everyone. It's a beautiful day in Brisbane and we are enjoying a very busy time right now in our life, but it's all going to be okay.
Yeah, well, we're getting through. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What is every single person created to do? We all have one purpose. What would you say the answer to that question is?
To bring glory to God, maybe?
That's a pretty nice church answer. Well
it's
done.
It's a church answer.
Yeah, I'll give you a gold star. And
I have Christianese down pat.
I would say we're all created to worship.
Yeah.
That we actually have inbuilt into us a propensity to worship. Now, we don't all worship God, but we will worship something.
That is true. So what do you consider to be worship?
Well, that's a really big, broad question. And that's, I guess, the topic for today is what is worship? What does it really look like? Because I think the average person probably, when you say worship, thinks music. You know, whether it's playing music or singing to music or somebody singing for you or whatever it may be, we always think of worship in a musical context, I guess you would say. And that is worship, but that's not the whole of worship and what it means.
Yeah. When we are churchgoers and Christians, we often think the answer to the question, what is worship, is music, songs, because that's what we call that time during the church service. When we are singing, we call that the time of worship.
Yeah, worship time. But it's an expression of worship, and it's not the whole of what worship means. And as a believer, worship actually is your life, how you live it, the things you do, the obedience that you display. When you're kind to someone, that can be an act of worship. If you go to work on a day that you're tired and you do your job still to the best of your ability, as if you're working to the Lord, that's an act of worship as well.
Yeah. If I look up what is worship just on Google, and so this is not a Christian definition, this is just the definition of the word, it says worship is showing profound reverence, love, or adoration for something or someone considered very important or sacred.
Yeah. So, as I say, when we live our life in obedience to God, when we're kind to others, when we do those sorts of things, if we're doing them from a motivation of love for God and others, as you know, the great commands are, the two top commands, we're actually demonstrating worship as well.
I think it really depends on the heart posture. So if you're doing it, if you decide to do something as an act of worship, then it is.
Yeah.
And that can be a sacrifice, that can be praise, that can be some sort of reverence, love, adoration, that all of those things. And often I describe it as, you know, you turning your heart towards God with affection. And that can come out of you in a song. It can come out of you as art. It can come out of you in dance. It might be expressed by doing something sacrificial for God out of your love for Him. There's a lot of different ways that you can express that worship.
It could be buying a homeless person a meal.
Yeah. And that's not always worship, though, because it really depends on the posture of your heart and why are you doing it.
Yes, the posture of your heart definitely plays a role in that. How, I guess, the reason why we do something. But like, I could make an argument that the nice things I do for people are acts of worship because I'm a really grumpy person and I probably wouldn't do it otherwise if I weren't doing it out of obedience to God and trying to do something that pleases Him by being kind to others. I mean, I'm just being honest. Like, most of what I do has some sort of thought in the back of my mind of doing it for God.
Yeah, and I think I've had a friend of mine tell me that that's how she treats housework. So if she's feeling particularly not desiring of doing housework,
unmotivated.
That's a nice way of putting it, unmotivated, she just thinks to herself, I'm going to do it as though for Christ. I'm going to do it as though for Jesus. And it really changes the way that she looks at it. And I do that too. If there's something that I know I have to do, I really don't feel like doing it, if I say to myself, I'm going to do this as if for Jesus, it really changes the way that I view it. And it sort of lightens the load because you're willing to do that for him.
I guess it also like helps take something mundane, like you say, housework. I don't think anybody enjoys doing the laundry and the dishes and vacuuming and all of that. But if you do it with a motivation that you're doing it towards God and, doing right by your family, it helps to, I guess, change your attitude towards it.
Yeah, Colossians 3:23-24 sums this up. It says, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving."
Yeah, well, I was in church this morning, and the person preaching was talking about when we get to heaven and there's judgment. There's not the judgment. If you're a Christian, there's not judgment for sin. That's already been dealt with when you became a Christian, and it was dealt with at the cross with Jesus. But there'll be a judgment of what God has given us. How did we steward that? Did we use it for good? Did we use it for evil? Did we just hide it under a bush and not use it at all? And so there will be this sort of judgment. And if we have done well, and it says it will be tested, then we earn a reward in heaven. And so I think sometimes if we think about we're doing something for a purpose, like sometimes, as you say, particularly with menial tasks, like doing the laundry, you kind of feel like there's no reason to this. I mean, we want clean clothes, of course, but beyond that, you kind of feel purposeless in that. And I know there's probably somebody listening, even in your job. You go to work each day and you just go, why am I doing this? Why have I spent my life doing this job? It seems kind of pointless. It doesn't amount to anything except for bringing in finances for the company, and I get paid to do this. But if you change that attitude about it and you change the perspective of, I can do this in a way that glorifies God. I mean, that was one of the definitions before, was this adoration, glorifying, awe of a deity. And in our case, as Christians, that's God. So if we do it in a way that brings him glory, we're doing worship. Yeah. And I think it would really, I don't always think about that in everything I do. And I work, in Christian work, I don't always think about what I'm doing glorifies God. But if I did, I think I probably would have even more energy for it.
Oh, for sure. I know that I would. And I should remind myself of this more often, because sometimes even when you like your work, or even when you are getting paid well and all those sorts of things, it can become laborious. It becomes a chore eventually, no matter what it is. And if you start to think differently about it, I'm doing this for God, it changes your whole perspective. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about worship today was because there was recently a memorial service for Charlie Kirk after he was assassinated, and the worship that they had before the service sort of started, or at the beginning of the service, was really special. And I heard a lot of people talking about how wonderful that was and how moving, and that the Holy Spirit was really present and tangible in the room. And I thought, that's what worship is like a lot of times, is you can really feel the presence of God, and it's just this amazing experience where you're with a group of people and you're sharing in that together. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that, about even though worship isn't just about singing songs, there is something really special about that corporate worship when we come together, and we do involve music in that. And at our church, they have dancers and flag bearers and, different things, artists, you can do all sorts of things to worship God. But that special corporate worship, let's talk a little bit about that, and how, as worship leaders, I know you've been a worship leader and a worship pastor, how do we cultivate that in a way that really ushers in God's presence and brings people into that place of a worshipful heart and attitude?
Well, I think it's what we've kind of talked a lot about before, as far as I think there's this beauty in unity where people come together in agreement. The Bible talks about that in prayer, that if two or more gather in my name, I'll be there also. And if two people agree about anything, before God, he will do it. There's something about unity. And like I know Dr. Randy Clark, oftentimes, he goes around the world and he teaches and prays on divine healing. And he will talk about the faith, like the unity of faith in a room. And there are times where the whole congregation has such a degree of faith that he's able to see miracles that he doesn't normally see. And he sees a lot of miracles, but even greater miracles when everyone's unified in that faith. So I think it's very similar in that when we come together in unity to worship God, there's a power to that. There's something about that agreeing to be together for the same reason. And of course, if that reason is to glorify, worship, lift up God, there's going to be a different sense to the room. I think his presence becomes more tangible. And I didn't get to see the service. I've obviously heard about it. Who hasn't, that's alive right now with Charlie Kirk, but I haven't seen the service. But I just think those are the kinds of times where we often will lay aside our preferences. You know, they're there because there's this tragedy that's happened. And so I think people come in more open-minded to participate in what's happening, to just be sincere and to be humble in that. Think about this. When we come on a Sunday morning, how many times have you heard somebody complain about the worship?
It's one of the things that really causes division in the global church, I think, is this idea of worship and how it should look and how it should sound and what it should be like and how it should be done. And I think it's kind of sad, honestly, because that's not what it's about. It's not about whether you like it.
Well, that's partly why I want to challenge the definition of worship today and broaden it, because we've compartmentalized it to be music. Now, I think most people enjoy listening to music.
But we all have different tastes in music.
Everybody has their preference.
Yeah.
I love country music. Well, I like heavy metal. Well, I like jazz. I like classical.
Some of the biggest stars in the world in the realm of music, I don't like their music.
Yeah, me either.
Because it's completely subjective.
Well, that's it, because it's art. And if we limit worship to an expression of art, and we have to, I don't think it's right to say contemporary worship's the best worship. Or to say, well, no, the liturgical type of worship, the old school worship, with a choir and an orchestra or a pipe organ, or you're singing hymns or whatever it may be, whatever you've grown up with or you prefer, you can't say that it's better than any other style. It's just different.
Yeah. Last year, I traveled to the UK with my parents. And when we were staying in London, we went to St. Paul's Cathedral for Evensong. And oh my goodness, it was incredible. And that's not the normal type of worship that I listen to or participate in. But I loved it because it was worshiping God and I felt the Holy Spirit's presence there. And I loved listening to that. It was absolutely amazing. Just the choir of voices with the cathedral, incredible.
Well, I grew up in the Deep South, and particularly the churches I grew up in, particularly when I was young, they were really old school sort of Southern Baptist churches, and they would have a choir, but usually you'd have somebody who could really play the piano, and, we would sing out of hymns and out of the hymn book and all of that. It wasn't contemporary worship. It wasn't drums and guitars and all that. You never, ever saw that. It would be a choir and a piano and probably an organ at times. But I also grew up singing in the Atlanta Boy Choir and traveled to Europe. And I used to get to go into those really old cathedrals and do Mass. We were the ones singing in Latin and doing the Mass for the Roman Catholic High Church, And so I've experienced God through many forms of worship in many different styles. I'll share this, most people don't know, but even as kind of a late teenager, early 20s, I sang in a Southern gospel quartet. And we went around singing Southern gospel music, and
and then you were in a contemporary rock band as well.
Christian rock band, yeah. So, there's been lots of expressions of that, but all that is stylistic. I guess that's what I'm challenging.
It's preference.
And to get back to my point is, how often do you come into church and you'll either hear one of two things. Oh, the worship was amazing today, or I just can't stand the music. I hate the way the drums are.
It's too loud.
Or it's too loud, or why do we have to sing that chorus 100 times? Or there's a big break between those that love it and those that hate it. And I guess my challenge and what I'm trying to say is, come into worship. If you come in with a unified point to worship God, that's your aim, that's your motivation, the style kind of is a very distant secondary issue.
Well, as you were saying, when we come together in unity to worship God and glorify Him, there is power in that, and it ushers in the presence of God. And if we go in with that attitude of, I'm coming together with my fellow Christians who I love, my church family, and we are going to unify together to worship God and glorify his name. And as a result, the Holy Spirit is going to be present in a more tangible way than usual. And it's going to shift things in the spiritual realm, and it's going to be a power for God's glory on earth. If we go in with that attitude, it doesn't really matter if we like the piano or if the music's too loud or if it's the style we prefer, because our goal is different.
Well, like I say, I've experienced God's presence in worship, singing in a language I didn't know, like singing in Latin. I had some idea of what we were saying, but for the most part, it's not my first language, and I don't speak Latin fluently or anything like that. But I've sensed that. I've experienced God in that music.
When I was about 8, we went to the Solomon Islands for a couple of months, and we visited churches that were outside with just sort of a roof. They had a roof and posts under the roof to hold the roof up, but it was an outdoors church otherwise, and they didn't have instruments of any kind. It was just voices, and they were singing things that I didn't understand. But it was amazing, the presence of God, and just the worship that rose up through those rafters was incredible.
Similar experience, not in the bush per se, but in Japan. I've been in churches, and of course they're singing in Japanese. I have no idea what we were singing, but you could sense that they were singing to God and worshiping God, and that his presence was there. So I guess worship has to be something in our minds that is greater than a style, or even, as we've said, being in a place to sing songs or listen to songs or participate in some form of artistic expression. Because I just think it's so much greater than that. I think that becomes almost an outpouring of what your life and your worship has been during the week. Have you been in God's presence during the week? Have you wanted to see God's face? Have you blessed him? Have you thanked him? Have you been thankful? Have you been grateful? And then if those things have been in place during the week, I think then you come in, regardless of style, you're able to worship God more sincerely and hopefully in unity with the people around us. I mean, this is part of, I think, why God wants us to be in church together, why he says, gather together, is because, yes, I can very much go out into the wilderness by myself. I could go hike 50 kilometers into the bush by myself and worship God. But there's something special about doing it with others.
I really noticed this during COVID. So when COVID was on for several months there, churches were closed, and we were doing church on the TV with our families. And for the first time really in my life, I kind of understood more deeply how important that gathering together is, because it just was not the same. Yes, it was nice to see the service on your screen and to sing the songs as the kids kind of all lost interest and wandered off and hear the sermon, and you kept getting interrupted by different things and whatever, but it just was not the same. And so when that was over and we were able to fellowship together again, I really appreciated it in a new way.
I don't know if we're old or what, but I did not like video.
I didn't
video
like
church.
it either. It just did not work for me.
I know some people love it because they can go to church in their pajamas, but it's not for me. It's just not for me.
I just lost my attention, drifted very quickly and easily.
Yeah. So there's something, to get back to your question, there just is something, I think there's a principle there that when we come together unified in one heart, regardless of whether we're praying for something, whether we're worshiping, whether we're just seeking God's face, it's that unity.
And I think you're right that if we come having prepared ourselves for worship throughout the week, then we can enter into his presence that much more quickly. If we haven't come prepared and we've had a really rough week, and we can still enter his presence, but we're going to have to do some work during the worship time to prepare our hearts for that and to become aware of his presence and all those sorts of things. But if we come prepared, then the worship time, we can just jump straight into that.
Well, here's the thing, and this will probably hurt some people's feelings. Worship's not about you. It's actually about him. And so we're not there to be pleased. Oh, I hope they play my favorite song.
Yeah.
And they play it in a way that I enjoy. It's actually just a vehicle. Like the songs are just vehicles to help us express our hearts. If to use probably a bad metaphor, but it's kind of like when you go buy an anniversary card, from the store, and it says, "Oh, my dearest love, you blah blah blah," and it's been written by a professional poet, right? So it might express the sentiments of your heart, but you didn't write it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it helps you to express those sentiments to the person you care about. That's all the songs are, whether you're singing a hymn or you're singing contemporary worship or whatever it may be. Those are just vehicles to help us to express our feelings and sentiment towards God, our love for God. So worship's not about us. It's actually about Him.
And just like with the card, it's kind of meaningless unless the true feelings are there behind the words.
Yeah, and we would have an experience of that. Like,
if you gave me a card telling me you loved me and it was, roses are red, violets are blue, sugar is sweet and so are you, but you didn't actually like me and you didn't think I was sweet and I knew that, the card would be pretty much worthless.
Yeah. So I think it's a challenge for us. And just as you say, with that card, if we're coming into worship to get something out of it, to be entertained,
or we don't have a heart that wants to worship and glorify God, we don't actually feel the way that the words of the song say, then it's not going to be an offering of praise to God. And
I love that you just used the word offering, because there have been times where it's a sacrifice, and that's a language that they do use in the Bible, a sacrifice of praise, because there have been times where I've been quite low and I've gone in and it's almost like God set me up, because every song was about God, you're good, and God, you're great, and God, you're so faithful. And I wasn't feeling any of that.
Yeah.
But I chose to sing it anyway. Now, tears streaming down my face, grumpy pants and all that other stuff, but I chose to obediently sing those words. Even though I wasn't feeling it, I believed it. I never doubted it. I believe it to be true, but my experience at that time was not that. And so it became a sacrifice of my pride or my anger or my indignity. I don't know. I had to sacrifice my negativity to give God the praise that He deserves.
Yeah, I mean, there will be times in our lives for all of us when we're going through extreme grief, when we're going through extreme sadness. We all go through suffering in times of trial and grief and loss. And if we take those opportunities to really offer God a sacrifice of praise, we're feeling low, we're feeling deep in grief. We might even be angry at God about what's happened. If we take that time to say, I'm going to worship you, God, and glorify you with all my heart in this moment, wow, that, God really honors that.
And as I say, I want to broaden that definition to not just be Sunday mornings and the first half of the service where we sing songs. I want us to think about, you're at work and you've been treated unfairly.
Yeah.
What's our normal response? Well, I'm going to get you back. It's like revenge, or I'm not going to treat you kindly at a minimum of, I might not do anything mean to you, but I'm not going to treat you with kindness.
Yeah. Or I'm going to show everybody I'm better than that.
Yeah,
or
you might
whatever it is.
Yeah. Well up with pride and go, I'll show you, or whatever it may be. What if we responded in a way, like the question I guess I want to leave listeners with today is, during the week, how do you worship God? Like, how do you bring glory to His name in your life? Because as you go through life, the normal stuff, you can bring glory to His name, and that is an act of worship. You don't have to have any music in the background. It's all about how do we act. And so I think it's that attitude, and we're worshipers. And this is the thing I sort of started with, is God has created in us to be worshipers.
Yeah.
Now, whether you've ever been to church or not, you worship something.
Everyone does.
Everybody does. Like, I love sports, as many of you know. I love sports, and I have my sports teams, and I get excited when they win, and I get upset when they lose. But I know people that they sort of live and die by their sports team, and that's what they worship.
Yeah.
I have a high school friend who is in a very prominent heavy metal band. Like, if I said their name, if you're into that kind of music, you'd know who I'm talking about. And I've been to those shows, And I remember saying to you, you came along one time, it felt very much like a worship service.
It was kind of scary.
Because the entire crowd knew all the words.
They had their hands raised, and you could just sense the spirit, the worship that was going on. It was, alarming.
They were worshiping the band and worshiping that music. They really was a worship service in this dark rock venue with heavy metal going on. And so...
And some people worship money and success and power and all those things.
So you will worship something.
Looks, if you're vain and you're constantly spending all your money on your looks, or worrying about getting surgery because your looks are fading, or any of those sorts of things, you might be worshipping your own looks or the way that people see you, and the adoration that you get and adulation that you get from others, that you're worshipping that.
Worshipping yourself,
self-worship, yeah.
The way, it's a simple thing. It's not perfect, but one way to start to identify what are you worshiping, ask yourself 3 simple questions. What do I spend my time thinking about the most? What do I spend my time doing the most? And what do I spend my money on? And if the answer to those 3 questions, you probably you can do that in your head pretty quick, and you can start to go, oh, yeah. So I think about the Georgia Bulldogs a lot. I've spent all this money on season tickets and hats and T-shirts and apparel and tailgating, and and I spend every weekend, my entire weekend, at football games. Maybe that might be your God that you're worshiping.
Yeah.
It's not hard. This is the thing. It's such a natural thing. Worship is built into us, just like breathing, that whether you have to be intentional about the focus of your worship. And if not, I can promise you're probably worshiping some other idols. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And that's okay if you recognize it and turn that affection and turn that back to God.
Well, the Jesus said that greatest commandment was love the Lord your God with all your heart, body, soul, mind, and strength. And if we're not doing that, then we are making idols of other things in our lives. We all do it. This is not a newsflash. We all do it. God knows that we do it. That's why he made it the first commandment, and that's why he talks to us a lot about that stuff. We all make idols of other things. It's in our human nature, as you say. But it's recognizing that and repenting of that, and then turning to God and saying, God, I want to put you first. I want to make you number one in my life. I want you to be the only one I worship, because you are the only one worthy of my worship.
Now, some of what we're talking about takes maturity. It does. Like, if you're a new Christian, this is not something that you probably have already cultivated in your life. So this is something I think you do have to cultivate maturity about. And so I guess my challenge is this week. If you feel like worship time is a hard thing, I know just for men in general, apparently church and worship is a challenging thing. Like, it's not appealing. It doesn't necessarily connect them, especially with our more contemporary songs that are very emotive in their lyrics, Some of us guys don't relate to that.
Yeah, and in our culture, guys are often more into things like sport and I don't know what else, racing cars or something. And it's not things that you connect emotionally. And a lot of guys find it hard to do that sort of emotional connecting. And worship does bring that out. So when we spend time worshiping God in church, we have to connect with our emotions. If we want to do this, fully and completely and offer a sacrifice of praise to God, we have to be able to connect with our emotions. We have to be able to connect with Holy Spirit. And that is hard for some people to do, especially guys.
So my challenge is, at least this next few weeks, when you go into church during the worship time, I'm not saying you have to sing louder than anybody else. I'm not saying you have to do anything. You don't have to raise your hands. You can do what you normally do if it's just stand there. But what the challenge is, I want you to listen to the lyric and try and project the meaning of that lyric to God, like kind of thinking like you're saying this to God.
Turn your heart towards God.
Turn your heart towards God with those lyrics. Now, this is basic, simple stuff, but start there. If worship is a hard thing, start there. The second challenge is find one way to glorify God during your week, in just your normal life and your normal living. It might be letting that guy into traffic that you don't want to let in.
And not flipping him off.
That's it. So it might be, just
pray a blessing instead over him as he pushes in front of you.
It might be a kind word to somebody. It doesn't have to be these great, huge things. God might challenge you to do a big, great, huge thing. Maybe go pray for healing for somebody, or, like I say, buy a homeless man dinner. I don't know.
It might be, putting money in that place and offering it to a charity, or offering it to someone in need, or offering it to God instead of buying yourself the fancy suit or toy or whatever.
Yeah. So that's the challenges for this week, to start to kind of broaden your idea of what it means to be a worshiper and what it means to worship. And hopefully we won't compartmentalize it going forward, as far as it's only about those few songs we sing at the beginning of the service till somebody gets up to preach. It's so much more. Worship really is a lifestyle, and it actually is so much more of who we are. And God is worthy of our worship. So if there's any entity, person, whatever you want to call it, that deserves our praise, deserves our adoration, deserves our glory, it's God. You've been listening to the Kingfisher Podcast with Eric and Bron Whitley. Thanks for joining us. We hope to be back with you again next week with a new podcast. Please keep leaving us some comments, and share this on if you think it would benefit someone else. We really appreciate your support. Pray that you have a great day.